They thought he was a genius. A government-cleared engineer, a quiet husband, a man with a resume so perfect, even federal background checks stamped him safe. But the day a 19-year-old girl crawled out of his bathroom window, bruised, bleeding, and missing almost half the blood in her body, police realized they weren't dealing with a rapist. They were dealing with something worse. Something colder. Something inhuman. The man later known as the vampire rapist had finally made a mistake, and it cracked open a hidden life built on torture, medical precision, and a hunger he'd been nurturing since childhood. People in Palm Bay thought they knew John Brennan Crutchley. Smart engineer. NASA contractor. Guy who wore wire-rimmed glasses and always looked like he was thinking about something complicated. Nothing about him screamed predator. Nothing suggested the horrors sitting behind that locked bedroom door in his quiet Florida home. That's the part that always gets me. Some monsters look like monsters. But this one, he blended into the beige of everyday life so well, he practically disappeared into it. But the truth is, Crutchley had been disappearing women long before he ever touched a drop of blood. To understand how he became what he became, you've got to go back to the very beginning. Back to a childhood that wasn't just dysfunctional, it was engineered to warp a developing mind. October 1st, 1946. Clarksburg, West Virginia. John Brennan Crutchley comes into the world, already wearing the wrong identity. Literally. His mother wanted a girl, desperately. She'd lost a daughter the year before, and when she looked at her newborn son, she refused to accept him for what he was. For the first 6 years of his life, she dressed him like the girl she'd wanted. Dressers, bows, ribbons. Every day was a performance, and if he messed up his lines, the punishments were brutal. Crutchley later told investigators he was beaten unconscious as a child. He said his mother burned his fingers with a curling iron when he resisted, and his father, cold, distant. Affection didn't exist in that house. You can survive that kind of environment and still grow up. Normal people do it every day, but sometimes, if the wiring in your brain is already vulnerable, something just snaps. And as John grew older, the snap was getting louder. By the time he reached elementary school, he was spending most of his time alone in the basement with electronics. Radios, circuit boards, anything he could take apart. He didn't have friends. Didn't try to make any. He watched other kids form bonds and realized he had no idea how those connections worked. Emotionally, he just wasn't built like them. What he did understand was control. Mastery. The feeling of dismantling something piece by piece and knowing he was the only one who could put it back together. And somewhere in that lonely basement, the fantasies started. Not normal teenage stuff. Something darker. Something that involved restraint, helplessness, total domination, and eventually, blood. It became the center of everything. Not violence for violence's sake, but a ritualized, clinical obsession. But Evan Crutchley wasn't stupid. He knew if he acted on the fantasies too early, he'd be caught. So he did what highly intelligent predators do. He built a mask. Through the 1970s, Crutchley played the role of a normal man shockingly well. He married. Got a degree. Worked respectable jobs, moved from state to state chasing better opportunities. But everywhere he went, a pattern began to form. Women vanished, not dozens at a time. Just one here, one there. Enough the local police would look into it, shake their heads, and mark it missing. Bodies weren't found. Evidence didn't point to anyone, and Crutchley drifted on to the next place. His mask was working, but behind the mask, the fantasies were evolving, sharpening, becoming procedural. He wasn't improvising anymore. He was planning, and by the time he reached Florida in the early 1980s, he had perfected the one thing serial killers dream about, a double life that nobody questioned. In 1983, Crutchley was hired as a senior engineer with a defense contractor. He held top-level security clearance, the kind you can't get without the government tearing your entire history apart. And he passed with flying colors. He lived in Malabar, Florida, had a wife, a young son, a nice house, friendly neighbors. He bought groceries, mowed the lawn, talked about work deadlines, and at night, he hunted. His victims were usually young women hitchhiking or walking alone. Women who trusted him because he looked like every soft-spoken, safe, good guy they'd ever met. He was methodical, controlled, clinical. Every year, he got better at covering his tracks. He became the kind of predator investigators dread the most. The kind who doesn't make mistakes. Not yet. Not Thanksgiving week, November 21st, 1985. His wife and son were out of town visiting family. The house was empty, and Crutchley finally had the uninterrupted time he needed to carry out his darkest fantasy in full. He picked up a 19-year-old hitchhiker named Laura. She just needed a ride. He looked safe. Se got in. He told her he needed to stop by his house to grab something for work. Se ai okay. When they stepped through the front door, the mask came off. The ligature went around her neck, and within seconds, everything went dark. When she woke up, she wasn't in a basement. She wasn't in a dungeon. She was in a normal suburban kitchen, except this kitchen had rope, lights, a camcorder, and medical tubing, the kind used to pull blood from a living vein. And Crutchley was smiling, because everything he'd dreamed of since childhood was finally happening. Laura Murphy didn't understand what was happening at first. Not fully. Her brain was too foggy, her body too weak, her blood pressure dropping through the floor. But one thing became painfully clear. She was never meant to leave this house alive. Crutchley worked on her like he was performing a medical procedure he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Because he had surgical tubing already prepped. 4 needles, organized by gauge size. Plastic containers lined neatly beside the counter. He had a whole station ready to go. And he didn't rush. That's the part that still makes my stomach flip. He wasn't chaotic. He wasn't frantic. He moved with the calm focus of a man fixing a circuit board, twisting wires, soldering connections, building something from scratch. Only this time the project on his table was a living girl. Laura tried to scream, but he'd gagged her. She tried to move, but the ties were tight. All she could do was watch him set up his equipment and listen to him breathe. He spoke to her like she was a volunteer. Like she'd agreed to this. "You're making this harder on yourself," he told her. "If you relax, it goes smoother." He inserted the first needle with precision straight into her arm. Her blood began to travel through the tube, slow and steady, into a container. Her vision blurred, her ears rang. Her heart fought to keep her alive. Crutchley watched the flow like he was studying data. Then he did something that still haunts investigators. He lifted the container, raised it to his mouth, and drank. And drank. Not theatrically. Not like the movies. Just a sip, calm, efficient, satisfied. Human blood, he said, is the perfect substance. He believed that. He believed it down to his bones. The draining didn't stop. Over the next 22 hours, he kept her restrained and conscious, just enough to continue the process. Assault, drain, pause, repeat. He wasn't a vampire in the supernatural sense. He didn't think he was immortal. But blood consumption wasn't fantasy to him. It was an obsession rooted in years of escalating deviance and medical curiosity. His clinical notes, found later by investigators, mapped out the optimal pace for blood removal without killing the subject too quickly. This wasn't improvisation. It was a system. But even the most calculated predators make a mistake eventually. Crutchley's mistake. He underestimated her will to live. By afternoon, he had drained nearly half her blood volume. Most people die with that level of loss. Laura didn't. But she was close-skinned, pale, lips blue, heartbeat sluggish. Confusion setting in. Crutchley decided she wasn't going anywhere. He handcuffed her, left her in the bathroom, and told her, "My brother is in the house. If you try anything, he'll kill you." He didn't have a brother. He just wanted her still and scared. Then he left for work. Yes, work. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, could disrupt the normal routine of his second life. Monsters like him rely on routine. Patterns protect them. Predictability keeps suspicion away. But Laura wasn't dead yet, and she wasn't giving up. The second Crutchley's car disappeared down the road. She forced herself upright. Airhead swam, her legs buckled. It felt like gravity doubled in that bathroom. Blood loss does that. It pulls your consciousness like a magnet toward the floor. But Laura clawed her way to the window, using the sink to stay upright. Her wrists bled under the handcuffs. Her breath was shallow and quick panic, mixing with hypoxia. She managed to unlock the window, pushed it open, and fell out. Literally fell, hit the ground, rolled. Lay there for a moment, staring at the sky, thinking she might die right there. But the human survival instinct is a ferocious thing. She crawled, handcuffs scraping against asphalt, elbows digging into gravel, bare feet dragging behind her. Every inch forward was a battle. Every inch burned, but she moved because stopping meant dying. When a passing motorist saw her, he slammed his brakes so hard his tires smoked. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. The first doctor, who saw her later, said she looked like a corpse that hadn't realized it was dead yet. Her blood pressure was critically low. Her veins were collapsing. Her kidneys beginning to fail. A hematologist examined her levels and delivered the verdict. She would have died within 12 hours. Maybe less. A slow bleed out without the blood to clot. Laura survived by a thread, and that thread was her fight. When police searched Crutchley's home, they expected to find evidence of the assault. What they found was a laboratory, not a dungeon. A laboratory. The kind of space only a highly intelligent, deeply disturbed man could design. There were restraints mounted in multiple locations. Tubes, needles, medical supplies, locks of hair from unknown women. Dozens of taps, some blank, some labeled. And then there were the trophies. 5 ID cards from women he worked with. Women who had already vanished. Dead. Missing. No one knew yet, but the pattern was clear. They found more at his office. Handcuffs, rope, tapes, and a copy of the Dracula Syndrome, bookmarked and annotated like a textbook. Investigators realized something chilling. This wasn't a one-time fantasy. This was a lifestyle, a ritual he had perfected. A ritual he had repeated, and Laura Murphy was the first known survivor. When Crutchley returned home and saw the police cars, he didn't run, didn't panic. He adjusted his glasses, asked what the problem was, and told officers calmly, "There must be some misunderstanding. Psychopaths." Love that line. Investigators arrested him on the spot, but the deeper horror came when the FBI profilers got involved. One name stands out: Robert Res, the man who interviewed Dahmer, Kemper, Bundy. A legend. And after studying Crutchley's case, he said something that chilled even seasoned agents. This man is at least a 30-plus body offender. At least 30. Maybe more. They had the pattern. They had the trophies. They had the setup. They had a survivor. What they didn't have were bodies. Crutchley knew that. And aussi d'Italiano. When interrogators asked about missing women tied to his history, he didn't confess. He smiled and stayed silent. A silence that echoes to this day. Crutchley pled guilty to the charges involving Laura Murphy. He received 25 years to life, but good behavior meant he'd be eligible for parole in just 11 years. For everything he'd done, for the dozens of women investigators believed he'd murdered. He walked out of prison in 1996. Free. Breathing air he didn't deserve. No parole officer wanted him. No county wanted him. Not even his own mother wanted him back in West Virginia. He was shipped to a halfway house in Orlando. Within 24 hours, he broke parole. Tested positive for marijuana. That violation triggered Florida's 3 strikes law. On January 31st, 1997, John Brennan Crutchley was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And that's where he died. But here's the part that still haunts investigators. They never found his victims. Not one. Every missing woman linked to him is still officially missing. Every family still waiting for closure is still waiting. and every unanswered question died with him. The deeper investigators dug into John Brennan Crutchley, the more they realized something horrifying. Laura Murphy didn't survive a crime. She survived a system he'd been running for years. Because everything in Crutchley's life existed in two layers: the mask and the monster. Good enough to fool scientists, corporations, security clearance, examiners, neighbors, supervisors, even his own wife. But the monster, he'd been leaving fingerprints on missing persons cases across multiple states. Fingerprints no one recognized until it was too late. The FBI files opened like a horror novel. When Laura's case hit federal desks, the first thing the FBI did was cross-reference Crutchley's addresses with unsolved disappearances. One analyst looked at the map and whispered, "Jesus Christ." Everywhere he'd lived: Indiana, Virginia, Maryland, Florida. The timeline told the same story. Girls disappeared. Patterns repeated. Reports stalled, and Crutchley moved on. They found a trail in Virginia. Multiple women who matched his type. Multiple bodies, turning up skeletonized in woods. Strangled, dumped, forgotten. And then the clincher. He'd kept trophies. Souvenirs. ID cards. Hair. Notes. Serial killers rarely keep something unless they're revisiting memories. Crutchley, he cataloged those memories like homework, the interview room that never recovered. When they sat him down, Crutchley wasn't nervous. He wasn't shaken. He wasn't even annoyed. He was bored. That's what several investigators said later. He sat with his legs crossed, fingers interlaced, posture perfect, like he was discussing a business proposal. They asked him about Laura. He said, "Well, something happened, obviously." They asked about the missing women. He raised an eyebrow, smiled, said nothing. Not denial, not protest, just silence. Calculated silence. Silence is a weapon for people like him. And when FBI profiler Robert Ressler reviewed the interview footage, he said something that stuck with agents for years. He's not hiding guilt, he's hiding pride. The tape library and the lock of hair back at the house. The search continued. The tapes weren't labeled with names. Some were blank, some were short, some damaged. One of them showed nothing but a bare wall, but the audio captured breathing. Slow. Measured. Not his. Another tape had a few seconds of a hand struggling against a restraint before cutting to static. A different tape showed medical tubing neatly laid out on the kitchen table. Nothing explicit. Nothing incriminating, but nothing innocent. And then they found the hair, multiple locks of braided or tied strands inside small sealed bags. Not one woman. Not two. Several. Hair is one of the most common souvenir items for organized serial killers. It lasts forever. It holds DNA. It symbolizes ownership. Crutchley kept it like a collector keeps rare coins. The wife, who lived beside a predator, his wife, Darcy, walked into the police station with her hands shaking. She wasn't a co-conspirator. She wasn't a participant. She wasn't even suspicious. She was blindsided. When investigators showed her the items they found in the house, she went pale. She whispered, No, that's impossible. John travels for work. John would never." But beneath the denial, the memories began surfacing. The locked bedroom he told her never to enter the nights he worked late. Without explanation, the missing towels, missing sheets, missing containers the times she woke up and he wasn't in bed, the medical books that had nothing to do with his job. The day she found rope in his sock drawer, she'd pushed every red flag aside. Because who wants to believe their husband might be a killer? The parole nightmare that should have never happened when the courts offered Crutchley a plea deal. 25 years to life. Victim advocates begged them not to, but the case lacked physical murder evidence. There were no bodies, no confessions. Who spatter, so prosecutors took the sure win. Crutchley smiled during sentencing. Literally smiled. He knew he'd be eligible for parole after only 11 years. And when 1996 arrived, guess what? He got it. He walked out of prison with his glasses, his calm voice, and his empty soul. The public exploded. Law enforcement protested. Psychologists filed warnings thick enough to use as doors. Every single expert agreed. He will kill again. It wasn't speculation. It was a statistical certainty. But the law was the law. Until fate intervened, the stupidest, most fateful mistake of his life less than 24 hours after release. Crutchley violated parole, not with a violent act. Not with an attempted assault, but with a single decision. He smoked marijuana. One drug taste, one positive result. One violation. Under Florida's 3 strikes law, that was enough. Enough to lock him away forever. Enough to slam the door shut. Life in prison. No parole. And for once, the universe got it right. The final years, and the disturbing truth. Crutchley adapted to prison the same way he adapted everywhere. Quiet. Obedient. Intelligent. Predictable. He worked in the library. Helped other inmates with paperwork. Talked about electronics and technology. But never about the women. Never about Laura Murphy. Never about the blood. Not once. But late in his incarceration, he said something to a prison nurse that still chills people. "You'd be surprised how much a person can lose," he said, "before the lights go out." He said it casually, like a fact, like weather. She said his eyes didn't blink when he said it. The death of a monster on March 30th, 2002. Prison guards found John Brennan Crutchley unresponsive in his cell. Officially, suicide by asphyxiation. Unofficially, most investigators believe he was staging something for attention, misjudged it, and accidentally killed himself. Either way, he died the same way he lived, trying to control something he couldn't. And he took his secrets, his victims' names, his burial sites, his full body count to the grave. To this day, the FBI still lists him as a suspected serial killer with 30 victims, 30 families with no closure, 30 women who vanished without a trace, 30 cold cases waiting in silence, and the terrifying truth. If Laura Murphy hadn't escaped, we may never have known about him at all. When John Brennan Crutchley took his last breath inside that concrete cell, a lot of people thought the story was finally over. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because Crutchley didn't just leave behind a trail of victims, he left behind questions. Large, empty, cold questions that investigators still argue about today. And the most disturbing one: how many, after his death, detectives across 4 states tried something they'd never been able to do before? They spoke freely. Because the gag order of Himaisu for defamation died we team, so former supervisors, state attorneys, FBI agents, and retired detectives finally admitted what they'd always suspected. Crutchley was responsible for far more than Florida ever charged him with. They compared notes. Missing hitchhikers vanished. Girlfriends' skeletonized remains, unidentified female victims, hair fibers, journals, travel logs, technical manuals on blood extraction. Some of these files weren't even officially connected, just placed quietly in an interest overlap folder. They never had the evidence to prosecute. But the patterns, they were identical. One analyst in Virginia reportedly said, "If you gave me unlimited money and unlimited time, my only investigation would be finding the bodies Crutchley left behind." But here's the brutal truth investigators admitted. They will never find those bodies. Crutchley was too calculated, too organized, too methodical. He understood decomposition, he understood geography, he understood forensics better than most detectives, because serial killers like him never act impulsively. They act like engineers. When FBI legend Robert Russler studied his case, he made a bold claim. At least 30. At least, not maybe. Not possibly. Not up to, at least 30. And Russler was conservative with numbers. He believed Crutchley committed murders wherever he lived, and his relocations were not casual. They were strategic. Every move followed a pattern. 1. New job 2. New clearance 3. New coworkers 4. New female social circle 5. New victims 6. Abrupt relocation. It's the same pattern you see in mobile offenders military. Killers. Trucker killers. Transient predators. Crutchley was a mobile predator with a high IQ and nearly unlimited access to equipment, free time, vehicles, and private spaces. And that made him a nightmare. The sickest twist. He almost got away with all of it, let's be brutally honest here. If Laura Murphy had died even 1 hour earlier, everything would have disappeared. The scene would have been cleaned, the body disposed of, the blood flushed or burned, the house sanitized, the evidence erased. And police? They would have assumed she left voluntarily. Like the others. He almost beat the system, almost walked out of prison for good in 1996. Almost continued killing, silently, efficiently, endlessly. But one 19-year-old woman, crawling through dirt with half her blood gone, broke the cycle. Laura Murphy is the reason he didn't walk free again. She is the reason dozens weren't added to that 30-plus count. Criminologists study him not because he was dramatic. He wasn't. Not because he was theatrical. He wasn't. He matters because he's proof of a terrifying truth. Evil doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like a quiet engineer with a stable job and a clean haircut. He showed the world that background checks fail, clearance systems miss things, smart predators adapt. Lack of evidence doesn't mean lack of danger. Normal is a disguise anyone can wear, and the most unsettling part, there are more Crutchleys in the world. Not with the same methods, not with the same fetish, but with the same emptiness. Tisame, Musk, the same hunger. When you strip this case down to its core, the truth is chilling. A gifted engineer with top-level security clearances. A man trusted with government secrets. Lived a secret life so monstrous that it remained hidden for years. He perfected control, perfected manipulation, and nearly perfected the art of disappearing his victims. The only reason we know the truth today is because one woman, half dead and handcuffed, found the strength to crawl through a bathroom window and expose a predator who would be kept killing in silence. Cases like this remind us that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it looks ordinary, sometimes it blends in, and sometimes it wears a mask so perfect that even the people closest to it never see what's underneath. If this story shook you, confused you, or made you rethink what a monster can look like, tell me in the comments. I read every one of them, and your thoughts help shape the cases we explore next on Mystery Vault. And if you're new here, welcome. This channel is built for people who love dark mysteries, real investigations, and the cases the world tries to forget. Your subscription truly supports the channel and helps me continue digging into stories just like this one. So hit that subscribe button if you want more deep dive. True crime told with honesty, respect, and clarity. And stay close, because our next investigation is one of the most disturbing disappearances I've ever researched. A case where the killer left no traces, no witnesses, and no clear motive. But the truth hiding underneath, it's darker than anyone expected. Thank you for watching. This is Mystery Vault, and I'll see you in the next one.